This morning, something told you what to do next. Maybe it was a screen, maybe it was a calendar block, maybe it was just the quiet weight of a list you never finished, and the feeling of already being behind before your feet hit the floor. Underneath all of it sits a comfortable assumption that this is simply the tax you pay for civilization, and that before civilization, life was a brutal scramble from sunrise to collapse. But the real answer is far stranger. Your ancestors were not scrambling. For most of the time humans have existed, the average person worked fewer hours than you do, ate a wider variety of foods than you do, and spent more of their waking life in direct conversation with people who had known them since birth than you will this entire year. That is not nostalgia. That is arithmetic. And someone actually did the counting. His name was Richard Lee. In the 1960s, Lee traveled to the Kalahari to live among the Juhuansi, hunter-gatherers in what is now Botswana and Namibia. He did the unglamorous thing almost nobody had done. He kept a ledger. Who left camp, how long they were gone, what they carried back, and how many mouths it fed. The number he found broke the story everyone had been telling. Adults spent somewhere around 17 to 20 hours a week acquiring food. Not per day, per week. Add tool making, repairs, and camp work, and the total still landed in a range most modern workers would sign for on the spot. And that total already included the cooking, the cleaning, the fixing, and the building. Does your 40 hours include any of that? Lee's numbers reached an anthropologist named Marshall Salins, who turned them into an argument that still annoys people 60 years later. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. His reasoning was uncomfortably simple. Affluence is the distance between what you want and what you have. You can close that distance by producing more, or you can close it by wanting less.
So what filled the rest of the hours? This is where most imaginations fail, because when you hear the words free time, you picture rest, you picture lying down and waiting for the next crisis to arrive. That is not what a day looked like. It began without an alarm. Light came through the grass of the shelter and people woke in stages rather than in unison. And nobody was late for anything, because late requires a schedule, and the schedule had not been invented yet. Someone rebuilt the fire. Someone walked out into the brush and came back reporting what they had seen. Tracks, weather, a bird calling from a direction it usually avoided. Then came the talking. Not small talk, planning. Among the hadza of northern Tanzania, studied for decades by the anthropologist Frank Marlowe, mornings were loose negotiations about the shape of the day. Who was going where? Who was going with whom? Who owed whom a favor? Who had been slacking? Who had a bad knee? The day was not assigned to anyone. The day was argued into existence. Then the camp emptied. Here is the first thing that gets remembered wrong. You have been shown the hunt 1,000 times. The spear, the chase, the kill. But on most days, in most camps, most of the calories did not arrive on the end of a spear. They arrived with women walking out carrying digging sticks and leather slings and coming back hours later with tubers, berries, baobab fruit, nuts, and whatever else the season had made available. Reliable food. Unglamorous food. The food that kept everyone alive between the exciting days.
And the hunting? The hunting mostly failed. A hadza man could go out morning after morning and return with nothing but a story. Kim Hill and Magdalena Hurtado, working with the Aceh of Paraguay, documented the same pattern in an entirely different forest. Big game arrives rarely and unpredictably, and any single hunter's odds on any single day are poor. So why keep hunting at all? Because when it works enormously, and because nobody eats an entire antelope alone. Meat was not food. Meat was a social contract. A kill was carved up and distributed according to rules older than any law you have ever read. A share to the man whose arrow struck, a share to whoever owned that arrow, shares to relatives, shares to in-laws, shares to the man with bad luck who will one day have good luck. You give away what you cannot store. And in a world without refrigeration, the only place to store a surplus is inside other people's obligations to you. Have you ever thought of generosity as a storage technology? By midday, the sun made ambition unwise. People drifted back. They sat in shade. And this is the block of hours that modern minds cannot process, because it looks like nothing is happening while something enormous is happening.
Tools were repaired. Arrow shafts were straightened over coals. Poison was reapplied. Ostrich eggshell beads were ground down and drilled and strung one at a time into ornaments that would then be given away. Because a gift in these societies was physical proof of a relationship that might feed you during a famine 300 kilometers from home. Children were not separated into a group and supervised. They were simply present. They played at the edges of adult conversation and absorbed the entire operating system of their society by proximity. How to speak, what to fear, who to respect, how to skin a hair, when to stay quiet. There was no school, because the entire waking day was school, and nobody had noticed. And there was gossip. Do not be dismissive of that word. Robin Dunbar, the evolutionary psychologist who gave the world the number 150, has argued that human language may exist largely because of it. That talking about who is doing what to whom is how primates too numerous to groom each other one by one manage to hold a group together anyway. Gossip is the immune system of a society with no police. It tracks cheaters. It deflates arrogance. It quietly informs the man who took too much that everyone noticed. Then the sun went down, and the day changed character completely. This is one of the most beautiful findings in modern anthropology, and it belongs to Polly Wiesner, who recorded conversations among the Juhuansi and then sorted them by the hour they happened. Daytime talk and firelight talk turned out to be almost two different languages. In daylight, people discussed practical things, arrangements, disputes, criticism, complaints, who was being unfair to whom, serious, useful, slightly abrasive. At night, by the fire, almost none of that survived. At night, the overwhelming majority of talk was stories, journeys to distant camps, ancestors, spirits, people who had died, animals that behaved like people, comedy, singing. Fire did something to the human day that nothing had ever done before it. It added hours that could not be used for work, and so those hours were used for imagination instead. Which raises a question worth sitting with. If your ancestors had all those spare hours, does that mean their lives were easy? No. And this is the strange part.
Hermann Ponzer, an evolutionary anthropologist, went to live with a hadza and measured something almost nobody had measured properly before. Not hours, energy. Using a method called doubly labeled water, which tracks how quickly the body burns through fuel, he calculated the total daily energy expenditure of hadza men and women who walk many kilometers a day, dig for tubers, climb trees for honey, and carry children on their backs while doing it. The result was not what anyone expected. Once you adjusted for body size, the hadza burned roughly the same number of calories per day as office workers in Europe and the United States. The same. A body doing hard physical labor in the bush and a body sitting in a chair under fluorescent light arrived at nearly identical totals. Sit with what that implies. The human body appears to hold its energy budget remarkably steady, spending it on movement when movement is demanded and on other internal processes when it is not. Which means the real difference between your ancestors' lives and yours was never a difference in effort. It was a difference in what the effort was for. And if you were assuming they simply slept the extra hours away, that was tested too. Jerome Siegel and his colleagues put activity monitors on people in 3 separate pre-industrial societies: the Hadza in Tanzania, the San in Namibia, the Tsimane in Bolivia. The expectation was long, luxurious, natural nights of sleep, the kind the modern world supposedly stole. The finding was the opposite. These groups slept somewhere in the range of 6 to 7 hours a night, slightly less in many cases than people in industrialized countries. Nobody was catching up on sleep. The hours were awake hours. Every one of them. So what did ancient humans actually do all day? They talked constantly. They walked, they dug, they failed at hunting, they succeeded occasionally and spectacularly. They gave things away, they argued, they repaired, they told stories in the dark. And they did nearly all of it within arm's reach of the same 20 or 30 people they had known since the day they were born. That is the part of the day your body still remembers. Now look at your own day again. Your food arrives without tracking or digging or seasons. Your shelter is permanent. Your chance of being killed by a leopard is 0. By every measure your ancestors would have recognized, you have won so completely that they would not have believed it.
And yet, your hours are sold to strangers. Your labor is divided into fragments whose final purpose you may never actually see. Most of the people you speak with today will not be in your life in 30 years, and both of you already know it. Your stories arrive finished through a screen from people who do not know your name. Your fire is a rectangle in your hand, and it is showing you a group of humans you will never touch. Is it really so surprising that a day full of accomplishment can still end in a quiet, unnameable emptiness? You did not evolve to be productive. You evolved to be necessary. Necessary to a small number of specific people who would notice immediately that same evening if you did not come back. That is what those 17 hours were protecting. Not leisure, belonging.
Tomorrow morning, something will tell you what to do next. It'll be a screen or a calendar or a list, and you will obey it the way your ancestors obeyed the movement of the sun. But underneath it, older and quieter and still running, is the only instruction that ever really mattered. Find your people, be useful to them, and come back to the fire before dark.